Hello, people of the internet. My name is JD Shadow. I didn't want to bring this up again, and I said I didn't want to bring this up again unless there was something new that occurred, something brand new that made news as to the change of channel, the channel awesome controversy that kind of got a little bit of a shot on the arm in the past month or so. But apparently there is some news. There is something new that occurred, and I want to touch upon that because I do feel that it got a lot of traction. It got a lot of steam within the past week or so. And I want to bring everybody up to speed about what had occurred. In case you don't know what occurred, and there's quite a few people right at the moment that know at least something about what happened here. But everybody knows about the cinema snob. Everybody knows about Brad Jones and the stuff that he had said to this whole controversy, the whole Applebee's tweet. And we'll get to that here in just a minute because apparently Brad decided to do a live stream with his wife. At least I'm pretty certain that's his wife, Laura, in which they reviewed 3 short films. Now, this was about a few weeks ago, and this was about an hour and 30 minutes. But at the hour 15 mark, that's when things started to become a little bit controversial. Laura went into how her father committed suicide and the ever serious situations dealing with anxiety, depression, and yeah, it's a very serious topic and it must be talked about. We don't know that much about mental illness and research needs to be done about it. And yes, anything that does raise awareness about that sort of thing is pretty welcome. That having been said, however, the funeral in question, the funeral of her father, was in fact the exact same funeral that Brad had claimed he got swatted at. Now, if you don't know what that whole story is, apparently someone who, at the very least, said they were affiliated in some form or manner with Change the Channel, or somebody who they believed was affiliated with Change the Channel decided to swat them. If you don't know what swatting is, go back into the backlogs of my channel. I have a few videos that go into this subject, and I don't think it's funny at all. It is a particularly dangerous prank to pull on somebody because not only do you terrorize, not only do you victimize a person, but also you run the risk of them being seriously hurt or worse, getting killed. We have seen it being done over and over. It is not funny in the slightest. However, Laura went into what she thought about this, and she said that unlike some others, thereby those people in the Not So Awesome document, she kind of shied away from actually saying the name outright, but we all know who she was talking about. Unlike them, Laura and Brad were actually the ones being abused. And she also refers to a few people and one particular person as calling them liars, never mentioning them by name. However, the reaction to this makes it pretty clear who she was referring to, and it is Allison Prager, otherwise known as Obscurus Lupa. And yes, we're going to get to what I believe that her biggest problem is in this whole thing in just a moment. But Lupa decided to respond to this, and this is where things go off the rails, because it is after her response to all of this that the dogpiling began on Brad's Twitter account. It got so bad, in fact, that he had to delete his Twitter account after he tried to thwart off all of these attacks. Lupa provided screenshots that you're going to see right here, and we're going to talk about them in a moment, where Laura mentioned that they were swatted. Lupa said that was awful, but then Laura starts to rail on Allison, saying that it was because of Change the Channel, that there were supporters of Change the Channel that did this, and that was when Lupa suddenly got really defensive. She said that, no, that's not what happened. No, that's not what happened. And then provided to end the conversation. You could probably see the whole quote of "we're done here." And other people started to join in and attacking Brad. Film Brain, of all people, someone who I don't think has really said much outside of the document, decided to chime in on this whole thing. And what you know it, Cinematic Venom, Rob Bohr, decided to also chime in on this, making a video concerning his thoughts about the whole situation. And let's just say they're not really supportive of Brad in any sort of way. He has also said that Brad is a liar. However, it is important to note that this is a re-upload. He said there were some editing errors that he had to fix. In the first version of the video, I did not watch the second version of the video, however, I did watch the first version of this video. He said that he wanted to work with the former producers on other projects at some point. He had the desire to do that. And that to me strikes as very revealing as to what he's in this for. And here's my thought about this. If he wants to do that, then more power to him. Just say, hey, I want to work with you guys in the future. Why go through all of this? Why go through bringing this back up? Because my whole problem with this is that he does not know what kind of monster he has unleashed. He doesn't know what he's awakened here. The more rational people who were in Change the Channel had left because of the more vitriolic people, because of the more toxic people that ended up co-opting this whole thing. And that's why I want to talk about this, because it does seem as though this whole thing that happened with Brad is a microcosm of what has gone wrong with Change the Channel. What has gone wrong here? And I do believe we need to step back for a second. We have to calm down. We have to take a breath and just relax for a few minutes and just listen to what the problems are. For one thing, this mob mentality, and it doesn't go just to Change the Channel, it goes to other things, but this whole thing needs to stop. It serves no purpose. It has no upside. All it is an angry mob at this point. It has no rationale. It has no rational thought. It has no nuance to it. That's why the movement did end up dying at the beginning of this when it came up the first time. It wasn't because no one cared. It's because the mob got way out of control. It got way too toxic. It got to the point where people thought that Change the Channel was just some mob that was just going to go after these people who were daring to speak up on Channel Awesome's side, even in the littlest bit. They went after Malcolm. They went after Tamara. They went after everybody who was still affiliated with Nostalgia Critic at any point. And that was not fair. Anybody who was trying to say, hey, you have to read the document or read the response was getting told, hey, you're just parroting company lines. You don't really feel that way. Shut up, shut up, shut up. That's not how things should be. And that's just what ended up killing this whole thing. And that serves as a double standard. The former producers got the opportunity to say everything that was on their mind. But the second someone who was still affiliated with Channel Awesome came out to try to defend him even in the slightest bit, got told that their opinions didn't matter. They got hand-waved. They said, oh, you're just saying the company line, as I said. Or they got told, hey, you're liars, as they did with Brad. And this is exactly the kind of crowd. This is exactly the kind of people that Venom is now pandering to. He got the most vitriolic people. And I wonder whether or not he's going to be upset that if he goes into other content that people are going to stay with him because they're there because he's telling them exactly what they want to hear. He's essentially feeding the monster. He's essentially feeding the mob. He's throwing the red meat there. But once he stops doing that, what then happens? He said stuff about Erod, and yes, Erod is a complete douchebag, but at the same time, he's probably a big example of how CTC became. And the sad thing is that they didn't really have to do that. They didn't have to. When Change the Channel began, when the document first came out, what should have happened is that the actions could have been that they wanted to raise awareness about these types of issues, not just with the public, but also with Channel Awesome to say, you know what, maybe you were human. Maybe there were some bad points and maybe we didn't help in that regard. Maybe we too got a little bit toxic too. We're not perfect either. We're human just like you guys are. And even if you didn't mean any ill intentions by it, it was still wrong of you to do these things. And all we would like to see is not only an apology, but also a show that you have gotten better over time, that you have learned from these mistakes, you have learned from these transgressions, and that you are treating your employees with some more respect. But instead, what we are seeing is the desire for complete destruction of the channel. And I don't think that 1,000 apologies would suffice, because it's not about apologies for them. If Change the Channel would have said that, then maybe Channel Awesome could have responded back with saying to the effect of, yeah, we understand that maybe we did some things kind of backwards there, but these are also very serious claims, and we need to make sure we're not giving anybody any other ammunition to take further actions. We want to make sure that this ends here. Here's our part of the story, and you can take it for what you will. We have to choose our words extremely carefully because of a danger that if we say the wrong things, this could incriminate us to the point where somebody might want to file a lawsuit. Be more truthful, be a lot more forthcoming in that regard. Now, that's not saying that the response didn't do its job in that sense. However, if CDC would have said that, but perhaps this could have been ended rather quickly and had a lot less heartache than it currently does. But the goal, as I said, is the complete destruction of the channel. And this is why you saw Brad act the way he did. Could he have acted better in hindsight? Perhaps. Maybe he didn't have to go off the rails, but you could probably understand why. You could probably understand why the hysteria was there. Allison might have said to not harass him, but she has a well-known history of instigating things. We know all about the Spoonie incident. We all know that she will not forgive Doug, albeit with Doug seemingly trying pretty hard in order to make amends from time to time. And she has to know that saying this kind of stuff, calling people liars about something that's very dangerous and very toxic in the form of swatting, is going to set people off, and it's going to make people get into that hive mind, get into that cult status, get into that mentality, that mob mentality. She has to know that. She has to be aware of that. If she's not aware of that, I'm not sure why she couldn't be. And she has to know how they will go about reacting to that sort of thing. They will go and attack Brad in that sort of way. And they have been so trained to believe anything she has said because of the fact that mob mentality works in that sort of way, that they're not going to listen to anybody else. They're not going to listen to reason. They're not going to listen to any kind of nuance whatsoever. She has to know what exactly she's feeding into here. It doesn't matter if she says that 10 million times. They seem empty because of such inflammatory statements. And it goes much further than Allison, and we'll get to more into Allison here in just a second, because I do believe that there's a lot in those 4 screenshots of those texts that raises a lot more questions than it do answers. But I want to get to this document for a bit because I want to touch upon this once more. First of all, no one has ever said that everybody in the document lied. No one who is rational, no one who is clear thinking, no one who is being reasonable has ever said that. No one is condoning abuse, neglect, or assault, or anything like that. No sane person is doing that. Now, sure, there could be some outliers there. There could be some people who decide that they don't know how to behave, but that is few and far between. So few and far between that even though they might exist, you might think that that would be the default status at this point of anybody who would be on CA's side, including Brad. So while you may not see that Brad is condemning that sort of thing, and he probably should in the back of his mind, it might not be as needed because the majority of those people are being rational, are just asking questions. The problem here is the all or nothing approach. It is the fact that if we call into question anything in the accounts, anything at all, then we must be questioning everything in the document. If we question something, say, if the Sega Genesis thing was worth complaining about, then to them, we must also be questioning if Jew Wario sexually assaulted a woman at MagFest. Those are a false equivalency. Just because we're questioning one particular piece of the document or a few sections of it doesn't necessarily mean we're questioning the entirety of the document or everybody who has said anything. If we did that, then we would be decounting Dr. Gonzo's testimony, which none of us have ever done. And questioning does not equal ignoring. If we were ignoring it, we would not be making the videos we are now. I would not be making 5 videos about that, now 6 and 7 and now maybe 8. We would not be making what we are now. But what we are doing is we're questioning. We are asking the questions. We are trying to be reasonable. We are trying to be nuanced. We are trying as best as we can to get to the truth. because we do have questions, and it's good to ask questions, because the truth might indeed lie somewhere in the middle. We must be able to separate particular accounts. If we question Lupa, for instance, that doesn't necessarily mean we're going to question Lindsay, and vice versa. Just because we question what Lindsay said doesn't necessarily mean that we're doubting a victim in the Jew warrior cases. Now keep in mind also that a big chunk of the document were from people who had already been friends, who have already formed a clique known as Chess Apocalypse, and who had already formed these cliques beforehand. So who's to say that there couldn't be a syncing up of stories to make sure that everything lined up right? Somebody who might be more of a questioning person, who is also thinking in a rational thought, who is actually being reasonable, might ask something like that. Why does it seem like everybody is good with one another, or was good with one another prior to this coming out? And if you notice, some people are right now paying attention to Dr. Gonzo's testimony. However, they're leaving out the very important thing about him getting ignored by the other producers when he was calling out for help. Now, my question is at this point, because he's still getting ignored to this day about that point from the other producers, whether or not he was trying to drop a hint in such a way that it would still appear in the document, but it would pause us for just a second to say, why were these people ignoring him? And because we do see that the media is still just focusing on one or two, or maybe up to 4 particular people within this whole document that still seem to be in the spotlight, it leaves us to believe that perhaps there could be exaggerated things, that some people could have escalated what they believe was abuse, or what they believe actually occurred, or spun some things into making it seem like that's actually what happened when the truth was something completely different. And that's why I believe that I understood what General Awesome said in their original response of sorry you felt that way. That to me said sorry you felt like they were telling you the entire truth, but we remember the stories a bit differently. We remember there were other things that happened that weren't what they said occurred. Keep in mind that some of those people like Lindsay, like Lupa, were involved in outrage culture, which is a thing that needs to die. And Holly as well. She's also somebody who, because she's a part of the Mary Sue, who is also a very big contributor to outrage culture right now, is involved in outrage culture herself. This is something that needs to be addressed. And because of that, many people could see them as they're going to call anything abuse. They're going to call anything like neglect. They're going to call anything harassment, even if it doesn't fit the normal definition of what abuse and harassment and neglect even is. And they're going to get believed because it is low-hanging fruit right now. Now, that doesn't mean that we would condone abuse, neglect, or harassment, but that also means that we have to be very careful about what we consider as such, because no two definitions are going to be exactly the same, because people see abuse, neglect, and harassment as subjective rather than objective. And remember, people are questioning, they're only questioning whether or not what the producer said matches up with what actually happened. If it turns out that it did match up, then of course they should be held accountable. However, given the attitude that people have to these questions when somebody does question them, it leaves a little bit of suspicion as to whether or not they're saying the entire truth or not. Not to mention that some people might know people like Lindsay from other areas. They might know Holly not from Channel Awesome, but from the Mary Sue. They might not know Lindsay from Channel Awesome, but from Dan Olson, who was also a part of Crash Override Network. And because of that, they might not see them as believable when they go to read a document. They're already taking it with a grain of salt because they already know that they could be seen as liars right then and there. And fair or not, that is something you have to consider. Now, I've delayed this long enough, so let's get to what Allison said, because she is particularly suspect in this. Because, for one, the Spoonie incident. Now, she had said something in the document about this whole thing, but this was just bullet points. Spoonie says an off-color joke toward Jazz Otaku. She took a bit of offense. They talked it over. They made up. They hugged and made up. and everything was fine. Then 1 month later, according to people on RPG.net, Allison decided to step in and bring it back up when something else happened a month later, and then she apparently called for his firing. And as I said, Doug seems to want to make peace in some form or fashion, but Allison is having none of it. She seems to want to hold the hatchet up high instead of trying to bury it. So it does seem as though she has a bit of a history here. And if it was just one localized thing with her and Laura, then I could probably say that maybe Laura was acting a bit hysterical. And yes, she did come off a bit hysterical there. Maybe she did need some time to cool off and calm down before she confronted Allison about this. And you could no doubt understand the whole nature of what was going on. She was at a funeral for her father who committed suicide. He felt that was the only way out. And anyone who would put themselves into her shoes might be feeling the exact same way. But given the other things that Allison has been accused of, something tells me that this is becoming a pattern here. Because the phone text conversation, if you go and really look at it, it leaves more questions than answers. Because one big thing that does strike me as rather odd is, how did Allison know that Change the Channel was exonerated of any fault whatsoever? If you notice that, there were other ways to calm her down and to say that, yeah, I will make sure that I distance myself from stuff like this, even though I don't personally know anybody who might have done this from Change the Channel or who says they're affiliated with Change the Channel or whatnot. I can make sure that this is addressed, and I don't want this to be a reflection of what this is. But instead, she goes and complete denies it, as if she knows something that we don't. And she asks, how did Laura know that it was Change the Channel? But my question is, how does Allison know that it wasn't somebody who was using the hashtag, who was using Change the Channel hashtag? There was no captcha to use a hashtag on Twitter, so how did she know that someone might say, oh, I'm affiliated with Change the Channel, I'm gonna go bomb somebody's house, or I'm gonna go swat somebody? And given how inflammatory she is, even though she doesn't think that she is, how does she know that somebody saw her calling Brad and Allison liars and then saying, I'm going to take a vigilante approach and swat them? How does she know that somebody didn't do that? How can she be so dismissive of that? And this is why her calls to not harass and bully and threaten Brad are weightless. This is such an inflammatory denial that it might actually do more harm than good. Because now what will happen is exactly what you saw. The dogpiling of Brad. Brad trying to quell the mob, but it never worked. And yes, there are far more people within the confines of Change the Channel who are committing to these acts than there are people who are defending Channel Awesome who are committing to these acts. And yes, I do flat out condemn anybody from either side who would commit acts like this. But here's the other thing that Allison needs to understand, and that people also need to understand when they're talking about what swatting is. It doesn't necessarily have to include people with AKs and riot gear coming to your house and screaming at you to get down on the ground. Laura, first of all, added that there was an attempt to swat. Police, thank God, have become a bit smarter in this regard. Now, that's not saying that there are incidents, because we sure as hell see a lot of these incidents taking place. Somebody was sent to prison for 20 years because he swatted somebody. There have been people who have been killed because of this prank. But if you look at some of the swatting attempts on YouTube, there have also been times when just the police will come to the house. 1 or 2 police officers will try to check things out, see if everything's okay. Maybe it's because they know this person and they don't believe that he would be somebody who had wanted to go and hold somebody hostage. There was a swatting attack on Khalib Hart, who is a Mega Man X speedrunner, who only had a few police officers come into his house and to just ask him, is there anything wrong? Was there anything that happened there? And we had a call. We just want to make sure that everything was okay. Swatting doesn't have to necessarily be AKs and riot gear, although that is the picture that comes to everybody's head, and rightfully so, because that's usually what you see. The point of it is you catch people off guard, and without warning, you terrorize the victim to a point where they don't feel like they should be doing what they're doing, and to disrupt their normal life. disrupt their day-to-day operation. And it's also because of that, unless you are filming things beforehand and it happens during the process of you filming something else, you're not going to be ready for it. The whole nature is to catch someone off guard. It is not going to be feasible to swat somebody when they know it's coming. So in that sense, there might not be any evidence by default, unless somebody was lucky enough to be recording the funeral at that point in time. And I don't see why anybody would, because it's a funeral, for God's sakes. I don't believe that there would be any physical video evidence of this happening. But that's why, one, making a false police report or a false police call is never okay, regardless of how severe or how minute you think it might be. Police have way better things to do than to entertain your little game. And what if it was in any way worse? What if they attempted to SWAT? And for what I can gather, I believe them. I believe Brad. I believe Roar that they were swatted or somebody attempted to SWAT them. And also, you have to do something which we're doing a lot of for the former producers, which is believing the victim. And it does seem like there's a double standard here. What proof does Allison have that they align? What proof does she have that it wasn't anybody from Change the Channel or that they're swatting anybody at all? And if you think about it, what is she now denying? That it was Change the Channel that committed to the swatting attempt, or that they were swatted at all? What exactly is she accusing them of lying about now? Because now you're getting into that territory. And like I said, no one's actually talked to Brad about his side of the story, about his side of things that happened in Change the Channel and what happened in Channel Awesome about the former producers. He never mentioned Allison at all in his initial tweet that got things going. And even in the Facebook mention, because he did say something about the people within Change the Channel celebrating his swatting in a Facebook group. He said this and then later deleted the post. But here's the thing, when he said that, it did seem as though the former producers came in and said that he meant they were, which is not necessarily what he said. If there were more than 10k subscribers to Cinematic Venom's channel after the documentary, that does seem as though there were at the very least, perhaps at least 8,000 people who are still on board with this. So there could be any one of those people. It could be any one of those. Somebody who has too much time on their hands or is completely out of their mind. But that's what they're doing a lot of, right? They're acting upon what they have interpreted to be the truth, regardless of what nuance or what they actually meant by it. They don't care. All they're doing is acting upon what they believe they've heard. And that's one of the many reasons why Change the Channel is showing that they are destroying themselves from within. Again, this is something that's happened before. Even though their intentions are just and rational, who's going to support a movement like this? Who turns on people if you step out of line even for a second? And who are so toxic and rabid to think that there are no bad tactics, just bad targets, and hand waves anyone who dares to say any other kind of perspective whatsoever. They don't need to agree on everything, but they do have to calm down. They have to hear other people out, and I don't think they're going to, because this is some of the most rabid mobs we've ever seen. But that's why they have to stop listening to those people who are only going to inflame them, because they're using them to their own advantage. They have to listen to people who are actually willing to talk about this in a serious way. They have to hear out those people that might have a different take. It's okay to ask questions. It's okay to have cynical thoughts about it, as long as they're reasonable. That's how you get to the truth. That's how you get to the middle, is if you have those conversations. And right now, it doesn't seem as though CTC is willing to have them. You have to question. You have to be questionable. That's how we got to the reason why the first case of the Justin Carmichael situation was left out of the response. It was because they were so confused about this first case and what exactly happened there. That was one of the most bizarre cases I've ever seen. And it was just so out there. It was just so unique. And plus, you have to think the victims didn't want his name to be mentioned. So what was Channel Awesome expected to do in a situation that had that many demands and directions for a serious situation? What could they have done in that scenario? Is there anything they could have done there? But the most important thing is, one, don't lump people and stories together. And the document did this sin itself. Just because we don't believe Allison doesn't mean we doubt Justin Carmichael did any of this stuff. But the most important thing here is that we listen. And we have to stop this mob mentality. This thing with Brad, even if you think that he said the wrong things and he acted out the way he shouldn't have, the fact of the matter is that swatting is a bad thing to do. And this more so shows that we need to ask questions. We need to be better at asking this stuff. And we have to be better at listening to people. And I get it. When you're angry, things just go off the rails. I get it. I understand that. But you have to think rationally. We have to step back, take a breath, relax, and look at the big picture here. Are we being used by people who just want to get the spotlight and are also using other people who actually did feel abused in this company in order to get the spotlight themselves? We need to be a lot more positive about things, this being one of them. We need to show that we want things to improve. We don't want to destroy, we want to build. And this is not building, it is destruction in the highest regard. And I hope that Brad and Laura are more at peace now, having said that and talked about it. Don't feed the trolls. That's going to do it for me. Please leave your comments down below. I know this particular topic does get very heated, so please keep it civil. We're going to stay rational about this, I would hope so, but I know people are going to disagree with me, so please be civil about that as well. Please take care of yourself and each other. My name is JD Shadow. I'll see you next time. That just happened.